Greetings, everyone. This is Sister Crystal here with Classic Hip Hop Storage Box, back with another episode. Now, I must say this you all see the title of this episode, but I must say today, September 3rd, 2021, the Romeo Must Die soundtrack has been released on streaming platforms 21 years after its release. Romeo Must Die starred Aaliyah and Jet Li and is an action packed remake of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Also, I must say that this video is not a sponsored video. Also, the Romeo Must Die soundtrack contains Aaliyah's pop number one hit, Try Again. Now, with that stated, Aaliyah's career almost ended before it really began. Let me tell you how. I'm also going to tell the story leading up to why I say that Aaliyah's career almost ended before it began. Now, before Aaliyah released her debut album, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number, on May 24th, 1994, on Blackground slash Jive Records, she was a professional wedding singer. And at the age of 10, Aaliyah competed as a challenger on the show Star Search. And at age 11, Aaliyah went on to spend 5 nights doing shows in Las Vegas with her aunt, Gladys Knight. And I want to say that this is a testament to the fact that she was destined to do great things in the entertainment industry with the right people being placed in her path at the right time. To further elaborate on that point, Gladys Knight is Aaliyah's aunt by marriage. Gladys Knight was once married to Aaliyah's uncle, Barry Hankerson, back in the 1970s. And from my knowledge and understanding, they were married for 4 years. And at the time that Aaliyah and Gladys Knight performed together in Las Vegas, Gladys Knight was no longer married to Aaliyah's uncle, Barry Hankerson. This speaks to Gladys Knight's kind hearted nature. Since she was no longer married to Barry Hankerson, that meant she also could have chose to no longer have any dealings with his family, including Aaliyah. So kudos to Gladys Knight for working with young Aaliyah and providing her with a place to hone her performance skills. Also, around this time, Aaliyah's uncle, Barry Hankerson, was becoming known for doing gospel plays around town. And this is how he met Robert Sylvester Kelly, better known as R. Kelly, when R. Kelly came to audition for one of Barry Hankerson's plays. It was reported that R. Kelly arrived late to the auditions, but despite this, Barry Hankerson listened to him sing and decided to manage R. Kelly and helped him get signed to Jive Records in or around 1989 or 1990. Shortly thereafter, Barry Hankerson introduced R. Kelly to his then 12-year-old niece, Aaliyah, and asked him if he could work with her on some music. During this time, R. Kelly only had 1.5 albums to his credit, which were Born into the 90s, which was released on January 14th, 1992, and he probably was working on 12 Play album, which wasn't released until November 9th, 1993. And so R. Kelly began working with Aaliyah on her debut album, which was recorded at the Chicago Recording Company from January 1993 until February 1994. During one of R. Kelly's earliest interviews, he shared his process of coming up with songs for Aaliyah's debut album entitled Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. R. Kelly allegedly was quoted as saying, quote, "When an idea for a song comes to me, I would turn off the radio and sing the song to Aaliyah. Once in the studio, she would sing it back to me and we would go from there." And so Aaliyah was sort of like a human Memorex recorder for R. Kelly when it came to recording the songs or remembering the songs for the Age Ain't Nothing But a Number album. Now, R. Kelly was the only writer and producer credited on the album, and it's allegedly because the record label, Blackground Records, didn't want multiple people to share in publishing rights. And Blackground was in conjunction with um, Jive Records. And here it says, quote, Clive was a publishing guru, so he and Barry Hankerson, weren't trying to cut a lot of people in on the album to share the publishing. They said, we're going to do this with one guy, and the publishing will be easy to deal with because it's one person. That's very interesting. R. Kelly and Aaliyah worked on the record in Chicago during the summer while she was off from school on summer vacation. She would fly to Chicago from Detroit and they would work on the album. While recording the album, the pair spent a lot of time hanging out together by going to arcades and bowling. This would help with the writing process because R. Kelly would, quote, write the songs that fit her and what kids her age and her friends were talking about. According to Aaliyah, he, quote, just spent time with me trying to see how I thought about things and what people my age think. And when discussing the writing process for the album, Aaliyah said, we vibed off one another. And that's how the songs were built. He would vibe with me on what the lyrics should be about. He would tell me what to sing, and I just sing it. And that's how the whole album was done. The first single, Back and Forth, was released on April 8th, 1994. The second single, At Your Best, You Are Love, was released on August 22nd, 1994, and is an Isley Brothers remake. Shortly after the release of the second single from the album, Vibe magazine ran a story which alleged that R. Kelly had married Aaliyah. Now, this was from the December 1994 slash January 1995 issue of Vibe magazine. Now, back then, all people had was the radio, magazine articles, and cable television. And when it came to magazine articles, they were often like a month or more behind. And this particular magazine, I believe they were coming out quarterly back then. So this was probably released back in September or October, maybe around October or November of 1994, Vibe magazine article. So, in doing research for this, I was wondering like what tipped people off to even look for a marriage certificate anyway. And so I looked here in this article here in Vibe magazine, and I believe they were tipped off from a question that Right On magazine had posted months before the Vibe magazine article had came out entitled R. Kelly and Aaliyah, Are They Just Friends? Questions had been swirling around for months regarding the nature of Aaliyah and R. Kelly's relationship, especially after their appearance on Video Soul, where they were dressed in matching outfits like a couple would dress. Now, the hearsay back in 1994 went something like this. First, everybody thought that Aaliyah and R. Kelly were, quote, so much in love that when he went on tour, they missed each other terribly. So he supposedly sent his bodyguards to Detroit to get her and bring her to Florida, where he was on a tour date. Then supposedly she traveled with him to Chicago to get a fake ID and married him in a hotel room. Aaliyah's parents were supposedly flipping, meaning upset, and her father supposedly wanted to put R. Kelly in jail. Supposedly, her father went and got his daughter from Chicago and forbade her to see him and vice versa. But supposedly, that didn't stop R. Kelly from calling Aaliyah, and when her dad answered, from supposedly saying, "Put my wife on the phone." Instead, Aaliyah's father put her on a plane to Europe, then Japan, where she went on tour for several months. Now, this is the rumor mill from back in 1994. Now, this is even more interesting. So, many of us know by now that Vibe magazine is the one that broke the story about the marriage certificate between Aaliyah and R. Kelly. Now, R. Kelly graces the cover of that same magazine, and on here it says, quote, R. Kelly is sitting for a vibe photographer, wiping perspiration from his face and head, leaning back in an armchair, not smiling or mean mugging, sipping from a tall plastic cup of ice water. He looks good, but the whole thing is strange. Being photographed for a story he refuses on the advice of attorneys and highly paid advisors to be interviewed for. So, journalist Danielle Smith was supposed to interview R. Kelly for this story, and R. Kelly wouldn't talk on the advice of his attorneys and advisors. And so, here's what Danielle Smith is saying. She's quoted as saying, quote, "The show was good," she says, she told him. And she says, R. Kelly nods without looking at me. She goes on, "I ask how he is. He still doesn't look my way." Then Demetrius Smith, R. Kelly's personal assistant, gives me his nicest, "don't even try it" glare. I've been instructed not to break out my tape recorder, pen, or paper, and not to ask any questions. Finally, it says, when Robert looks at me, I try my best to stare him down through the shades. It doesn't work. At one point, two fans walk in, women in their 20s. After getting Kelly's autograph, they ask him about the rumors of his marriage. He just shrugs. They ask if it's true that Aaliyah is pregnant. He tells them in a low, raspy voice, "Don't believe everything you read." Now, it's very important to note his response to those fans that asked if Aaliyah was pregnant, because that was also in the rumor mill back in 1994. Now that it's come out that there is a marriage certificate of some sort which lists R. Kelly, whose name is Robert Sylvester Kelly, as age 27, and Aaliyah, whose name is Aaliyah Dana Haughton, as age 18, I'm going to talk about the fallout from this and how Aaliyah was vilified for it. After the Vibe magazine story broke, it was reported that the two were split up and Aaliyah was sent overseas to continue to tour in support of the album. Among the rumors that plagued Aaliyah was that she, quote, lied about her age to R. Kelly. So the overall sentiment back then about Aaliyah was that she was a young seductress who seduced R. Kelly and pretty much lied about her age, got a fake ID, and was getting him in trouble. And this poor man, he did not know that this girl was as young as she was. And that was the sentiment that was going around. And it was so bad back then, even when this was back in January 1995, when Aaliyah appeared on the Lady of Soul Awards. She was a presenter. She got booed. Now imagine she's a teenager, she's getting booed, and it was absolutely awful. And I remember watching that on cable and I was furious. I'm like, how can these people blame this young teenage girls? Like, why wouldn't you put more of the blame on the so-called adult? But that didn't happen for Aaliyah. She pretty much took the blame for it, and R. Kelly and everyone else just kind of left her out there by herself. That is my opinion. In fact, it had got so bad for Aaliyah when it came time for Aaliyah to do her second album. it was very difficult for them to find producers who would even work with her. Meanwhile, R. Kelly is just cruising along like nothing happened. Now, I must note that at the time the Vibe magazine article came out in 1994, both Aaliyah and R. Kelly were pretty much up and coming artists. And my theory is that the concern was trying to salvage their careers, and that's why they just broke up and went their separate ways. Another thing too, which I didn't know, was that Barry Hankerson at that time was managing both Aaliyah and R. Kelly. Now, at one point, Aaliyah was being managed by her mother and her father, and at one point, the father, I guess he was no longer able to manage Aaliyah, and the management was given over to the uncle. So I did not know that the uncle was managing them both at the time that that situation happened. So that probably was not a good idea for him to be managing both of them at the same time, but oh well. Now, fast forward to 2002, there's an article from GQ magazine, the September 2002 edition. Now, by this time, unfortunately, we had lost Aaliyah, and she had went on and did two follow-up albums after Age Ain't Nothing But a Number, which are One in a Million and the Aaliyah album. This GQ article gave some interesting details surrounding the marriage ceremony. And it says on August 31st, 1994, Kelly surprised the 15-year-old Aaliyah by taking her to a room at the Sheraton Gateway Suites in suburban Rosemont near O'Hara International Airport. Waiting there were the Reverend Nathan J. Edmond and a falsified marriage certificate listing the girl's age as 18. And it mentioned that at the time, Edmund refused to talk about that day. Now, I must say this right now, there is a trial that's going on with R. Kelly, and this same preacher is testifying about the events of that day. So he is talking now, but it was stated that he said he really didn't want to talk. Now, one of the things I'm hearing is that it doesn't sound like this preacher or what have you is saying that Aaliyah has nothing to do with it. And that's really what he needs to be saying, because that's what the GQ article has brought out. And I really do believe this article, because that's one thing about the truth. You get the truth buried deep down in some stuff, and you hear a whole bunch of lies. You hear the lies all the time, but when it comes to the truth, you may hear it one time and it gets buried. So I'm going to continue on. It says the certificate on file with the Cook County clerk says he pronounced Robert S. Kelly and Aaliyah Dana Haughton man and wife. Friends and family members say Aaliyah thought it was all an elaborate game. Surrounded by flowers and swept up in the drama, she floated through the ceremony as if in a daze. But when the star tried to take her on a plane to Florida, where he was starting a tour, she ran to her family for help. The article continues. Aaliyah's family was not amused, sources say. Her father, Michael Houghton, was livid. Her uncle, Kelly's manager, Barry Hankerson, was also angry, though at the time he was still willing to forgive his star client as, quote, this big dumb kid who just did something really stupid. About a month after the wedding, Kelly paid Aaliyah $100, and the two entered a non disclosure agreement before a judge in Detroit. They agreed never to speak about their relationship, and Aaliyah waived all civil claims against Kelly. The marriage was annulled, and Aaliyah never saw Kelly again. So, to sum it up, Aaliyah had absolutely nothing to do with the falsified marriage certificate. Therefore, the blame needs to be placed on the adults in the situation. Now, hopefully, this has helped to dispel some of the false narratives surrounding the Aaliyah and R. Kelly marriage certificate situation. Now, there are many questions out there, including but not limited to: why did they get married? Was Aaliyah pregnant? If so, what happened to the baby? Also, if you made it this far, I really appreciate you. And I will ask if you would like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video. Thank you kindly. This has been Sister Crystal with Classic Hip Hop Storage Box, and I'm looking forward to your comments on this video. And until next time, take care.